everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are taking on a truly ambitious project. We're going to synthesize 14 foundational ancient texts into one massive, epic literary narrative. We're talking about the ultimate story of creation, failure, redemption, and deliverance. Basically, the whole shebang. We call this the Covenant Cycle. You see, these texts aren't just isolated stories. They're actually this brilliant, interconnected cycle that has quite literally shaped human thought for millennia. I am absolutely thrilled to guide you through this, so let's get right into it. Okay, let's dive into our thematic roadmap for today. We're going to hit 5 key areas. First up, creation and divine majesty. Then, the fall and the law. Third, we'll look at dramatic tests of faith. Fourth is sin and sincere repentance. And finally, prophets and deliverance. All right, Section 1, Creation and Divine Majesty. So we have to begin at the absolute beginning, taking this awe-inspiring macro view of the universe. This sets up the sheer cosmic scale and ultimate divine power for everything that follows. I mean, think about it. There are very few phrases in all of human history as powerful as this one from Genesis 1, "Let there be light." The text paints this incredibly vivid picture of a universe that is initially just formless, empty, basically a dark void. But then, through a simple spoken command, order and life just burst into existence. It immediately establishes a creator whose very words have the power to organize the entire cosmos. And this brilliantly illustrates the immediate shift from that cosmic perfection down to human agency. In Genesis 3, we are introduced to 2 specific trees, the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. The entire narrative hinges right here, on the exact moment the first humans are tempted, make the choice to disobey, and are ultimately exiled from Eden. It's like a giant puzzle where the perfect harmony of creation gets completely fractured by just a single fateful decision. But here's the thing. Even as humanity falls, the source material continually pulls us back to remind us of that immense divine scale we started with. Take Isaiah 40, for example. The text asks, who else has measured the waters in the hollow of his hand or weighed the mountains on scales? It actually portrays entire nations as just a drop in a bucket. To put that into perspective, it's a breathtaking reminder of an everlasting creator, one who never grows tired, never gets weary, and who actually gives strength to the exhausted. It perfectly grounds all this intense human drama within a vast, unshakable cosmic reality. Moving on to Section 2, the fall and the law. Now, with humanity officially outside of Eden, the text naturally transitions from that huge macro view down to a deeply micro view. It starts examining how humanity's moral struggles in a broken world really necessitated some strict foundational boundaries. What's absolutely fascinating about the Decalogue, or the 10 Commandments from Exodus 20, is just how brilliantly efficient it is. It serves as this comprehensive architectural framework, neatly categorized into 2 main pillars. On one hand, you have your duties to God, things like having no other gods, not making idols, keeping the Sabbath. And then on the other hand, duties to neighbor. Do not murder, do not steal, do not give false testimony. It's a structural design intentionally meant to maintain societal order and help repair the massive rift caused by the fall. That brings us to Section 3, Dramatic Tests of Faith. As we read on, a major literary theme starts to emerge. The law alone simply wasn't enough. To truly navigate the covenant, the narrative leans heavily on these extreme, deeply personal tests of individual faith. If we map out how this plays out over time, we move chronologically from Abraham the patriarch, over to Moses the lawgiver, down to King David, then to the fiery prophet Elijah, and all the way to Daniel in exile. Every single one of these historical figures hits a wall where the law just isn't enough, and they have to rely completely on their trust in the divine. And wow, the source text details some incredibly intense dramatic peaks here. I mean, in Genesis 22, Abraham is commanded to do the absolute unthinkable, sacrifice his beloved son Isaac. Then centuries later in Daniel 6, Daniel is literally thrown into a den of hungry lions simply because he refuses a royal decree that forbids him from praying to his God. In both of these narratives, it's their unwavering trust that results in these dramatic, miraculous rescues. An angel literally stops Abraham's hand, and the lions' mouths are shut. Let's see how this tension really builds by looking at arguably one of the most complex figures in the entire cycle, King David. On one hand, you've got the young, faithful shepherd from 1 Samuel 17,
fearlessly facing the giant Goliath with literally just a sling and 5 smooth stones. But then, fast forward to 2 Samuel 11, and we see David as a corrupt, plotting king. This dichotomy is just stunning. It really emphasizes the text's incredibly realistic, unvarnished view of human nature.
Which leaves us straight into Section 4, Sin and Sincere Repentance. These texts boldly subvert that typical ancient perfect hero trope by showcasing the profound, devastating moral failure of Israel's most celebrated king. The text actually breaks down the calculated escalation of David's sin, step by tragic step. First, while his army is off at war, David stays behind and spies Bathsheba bathing. Second, he uses his massive power to send for her and sleeps with her. Third, when she becomes pregnant, he tries to cover the whole thing up by recalling her husband, Uriah the Hittite, from the battlefield. And fourth, when Uriah proves way too honorable to go home while his men are out fighting, David writes a literal death warrant. He orders his commander to abandon Uriah at the front line so he'll be killed. It is a chilling, incredibly steep fall from grace. But, spoiler alert, the king doesn't get away with it. The prophet Nathan confronts David using a parable about a rich man stealing a poor man's only beloved lamb. When David furiously declares that the rich man must die, Nathan delivers this piercing, unforgettable accusation. You are the man. With just those 4 words, Nathan completely strips away David's royal immunity. He forces the king to face his devastating guilt head-on.
So, the crucial point here is how the text defines true redemption. In Psalm 51, we get to read David's agonizing, sincere repentance. Notice that he doesn't offer gold or political favors to make things right. Instead, he begs to be washed and cleansed with hyssop. He explicitly states that God doesn't take pleasure in burnt offerings. Actually, the true sacrifice is a broken spirit and a broken and contrite heart. The text insists that ultimate restoration requires complete, absolute moral honesty and humility.
And finally, Section 5, Prophets, Power, and Deliverance. Whenever kings fail and the people stray, the narrative consistently relies on the dramatic, highly theatrical actions of the prophets to bring about deliverance. One of the most iconic moments of this kind of divine intervention begins in Exodus 3, at the burning bush. Here, the divine empowers a reluctant, honestly fearful Moses to go back and stand up to the most powerful empire in the entire world, Egypt. It's also the exact moment where the eternal name, I am who I am, is revealed. This signals a massive, macro-level deliverance, essentially promising that the same God who organized the cosmos is intimately involved in freeing the oppressed. And then, oh man, we have the pure theatrical triumph of Elijah in 1 Kings 18. Elijah issues this massive challenge to 450 prophets of the idol Baal. The rules are pretty simple. The God who answers by fire is the true God. So the prophets of Baal shout and dance all day long, but they get absolutely nothing. Silence. Then Elijah steps up. He completely drenches his altar with water 3 separate times just to make it literally impossible to burn. He prays, and boom, divine fire immediately falls. It consumes not just the sacrifice, but the wood, the stones, and even the water in the trench. It is an absolutely incredible showdown. However, we have to note that the cycle isn't always marked by immediate triumph. If we look at the book of Amos, we see a deeply tragic reality. God recounts sending famines, droughts, blights, and even plagues, all intended to wake the people up morally. But after every single disaster, Amos repeats this heartbreaking refrain, "Yet you have not returned to me." It goes to show that despite these highly dramatic interventions, human stubbornness remains an incredibly powerful and tragic force. So what does all of this mean for us? Why synthesize these ancient texts into this explainer today? Well, it's because these texts endure precisely because they so perfectly mirror the complexities of the human condition. Whether we're talking about the universal struggle to maintain morality in a totally chaotic world, dealing with the crushing weight of personal guilt like David did, standing up to the literal or metaphorical giants in our lives, or just searching for meaning, this ancient covenant cycle remains profoundly, deeply relevant to us. And to wrap things up, I want to leave you with this breathtaking question from the book of Job. After Job demands answers for human suffering, the voice in the storm finally speaks, but not with comfort, with a challenge. It asks, "Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation?" It's such a provocative, humbling question. It really leaves us to ponder humanity's incredibly small, yet deeply cherished place within this vast, awe-inspiring universe. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep asking questions, and I'll catch you next time.